So, are you struggling with how to teach the story of Zacchaeus in Luke chapter 19? I think I can help. Welcome, teachers. This is Teaching with Power, and by the end of this video, you're going to have an effective and insightful way to teach this really fun story. And I do have a special request of you. If at any time you feel like this video is helping you, then please hit the subscribe button below, because that's what's going to help the channel to grow and become more visible to other people who also might need some help with teaching the scriptures. Also, be sure to check out my other videos in this series for the Come Follow Me week of May 20th through the 26th. I usually do about 2 to 3 videos per week. So first of all, I can't even spell this guy's name right, even when I'm looking straight at it in the scriptures. And so I wouldn't consider myself an expert on his pronunciation, but I did look up a video on how to pronounce it, and they called him Zacchaeus, which is actually the way that I've always said it, but I've also heard Zacchaeus or Zacchaeus. Either way, regardless of how you say his name, I really love this story, and I really love him as a personality. There's just something delightfully charming about picturing this little guy enthusiastically shimmying up the tree to see Jesus. But to start, for an icebreaker, you can try this little activity. And side note, I didn't make this one up. I got this idea from Dieter F. Uchtdorf, a talk he gave in General Conference way back in April 2010. But what you do is you take out a crisp, brand new $20 bill, if you can get your hands on one, and then ask, how much is this worth? $20. Then you can take out a crumpled, dirty, worn, ragged $20 bill and ask the same question. How much is this worth? And again, the answer is $20. So here you say, no matter what the bill looks like on the outside, or how worn or used or unappealing it looks, it's still worth the full $20, right? Then you say, we'll come back to this idea later, but please keep this in mind while we take a look at the story of a man named Zacchaeus in Luke chapter 19. And I want you to look for all the qualities we learn about Zacchaeus in verses 1 through 4 and verse 7. And what they'll find is that he was chief among the publicans, which that means he was a tax collector, rich, little in stature, which means he was short. And in verse 7, you'll see they describe him as a sinner. And you look at that list and you realize that there are multiple reasons for this people not to like him. I mean, he has a job they despise, a social status they despise, a religious status they despise, and besides all that, he's short. So he has an appearance that they despise. And I can just imagine him trying to make his way through the crowd to see Jesus, and people just edging in and blocking him and saying things like, oh boy, here's Zacchaeus, and shoving their backs closer together to crowd him out. There wasn't anybody that was willing to say, hey, Zacchaeus, come on over here. I know it's hard for you to see. Let me help you through the crowd. And the description that sticks out most to me is that he was little in stature. And yes, I know that means that he was short, but more than that, in their eyes, he's little in stature. He's less than them. They look down on him both literally and figuratively. He's not a part of the press or the crowd. He's little in social stature. So to help your listeners liken the scriptures, you could ask them, in our day, what are some of the things that make people little of stature in the eyes of others? What are some of the reasons we exclude other people or ignore them? And you'll probably get a lot of the same reasons that they despise Zacchaeus, right? Perhaps there's something about their physical appearance that we don't approve of. They're too tall, too short, too overweight, not beautiful in a worldly sense. They dress differently. They have a disability. Maybe even racial or ethnic differences in their appearance cause us to see or treat them differently. Maybe it's something about their personality. They're a little odd, socially awkward. They have some quirks about them that make them little of stature in our eyes. Maybe we see them differently because of their religious status. They aren't active. They're not religious at all. They live according to different standards than we do. I mean, do you treat somebody differently because they have tattoos or a cigarette in their mouth? Zacchaeuses are all around us. They're in our workplaces, in our wards, our schools, in the lunchroom, in the hallway, in our neighborhoods, and in a way, in society in general. There are entire groups of people, or neighborhoods, or ethnicities that we tend to ignore or give the cold shoulder. Zacchaeuses are those people that, for whatever reason, just don't seem to fit in. And what does society tend to do to those people? They're pushed to the margins. They're always on the outside looking in. We leave them up in their trees there, alone, looking down, just hoping to maybe catch a glimpse of the excitement that everybody else seems to have. So then you could say, Jesus is going to show us, by example, what we should do when we meet the Zacchaeuses in our lives. Then read verses 5 through 10 with them and let them tell you what they found. I imagine they'll point out some things like, in verse 5, he saw him. We need to see these people, not just ignore them or look right through them. Jesus always saw the individual through the crowd. Also in verse 5, he abode with him, meaning he spent time with him. He gave him his attention and his friendship. And I could just see how this went down. I just picture Jesus looking up at this little guy, clinging to his branch in the sycamore tree and with a huge smile on his face saying, "Zacchaeus, come on down, for today I must abide at thy house." And I love that word must. It's like, I just got to hang out with you. I'm going to have lunch with you. Come on down. And then Zacchaeus, overjoyed, sliding down the tree trunk to spend time with the Savior. Of all the people Jesus could have had lunch with that day in the entire city of Jericho, he picked Zacchaeus. Next, they might pick out the description of how Jesus saw him in verse 9. Earlier, we found out that when the people saw Zacchaeus, they saw a sinner, a traitor, an outcast, somebody little of stature. But what did Jesus see according to verse 9? He saw a son of Abraham. Or we would say, Jesus sees the son or daughter of God in every single one of us. Jesus just sees differently than we do. And hopefully they see the last two in verse 10, where he says, "For the Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which was lost." So we too should seek them out and try to save them. So what should we do when we encounter the Zacchaeuses of our lives? See them, abide with them, or give them our time and attention, recognize their worth as sons and daughters of God, seek them out, and save them. And many of these people really do need our saving. Now you could say, so back to our analogy of the $20 bill. How are people like that? And you get it, and they will too. It doesn't matter what we look like on the outside, or how used up we might feel, or unappealing we think we are all the same value. And perhaps a good cross-reference that you could share, Doctrine and Covenants, chapter 18, verse 10. The worth of souls is great in the sight of God. So now to put this in more personal terms, you could ask, can you think of any Zacchaeuses in your life? Give them some time to think about that. And then, at times, direct invitations can be very powerful in a lesson. So you could ask, I invite you to follow the example of the Savior the next time you meet a Zacchaeus. And maybe just one more quick final thought. Another way you could approach this is to ask the question, what side of the story do you see yourself in? Are you one of the little in stature, or are you part of the press? And I think that most of us can probably see ourselves in both places. In some areas of our lives, we're in the press, and in others, we're probably up in the tree. Maybe we're in the press in our ward or our neighborhood, but we're up in the sycamore tree in our workplace. Either way, Jesus has a message for both groups. If we're in the press, we should be looking up for the Zacchaeuses and opening a way for them, calling them down from their trees and bringing them into our presence and our attention, because they're children of God. And if we're in the tree ourselves, if you see yourself as a Zacchaeus, please recognize your value to him, how much he loves you and is aware of you. Jesus always sees the individual through the press, and he always has time for you. You're always welcome in his kingdom. So come down out of the tree and sup with the Master. Well, I hope that's given you some ideas on how to teach this phenomenal story from the life of Jesus Christ. If it's helped you, then I encourage you to hit the like and the subscribe buttons, and then go out and share it with other people that it could also help. And one of my favorite things that I love about being a teacher is being taught by my listeners. So if you have anything from this story that you love that I totally missed, put it in the comments below. I would really love to hear what you have to say. All right then, my friends, go out and teach with power.